Turning to news from Israel, the IDF announced today the arrest of 3 terrorists responsible for the attack on Route 60 earlier this month, which killed Rabbi Michael Mark. 1 terrorist was killed in the operation near Hebron, which turned violent. Senior defense correspondent Shai Ben Ari with more on the overnight events.
An overnight raid in the southern West Bank developed into a violent exchange between Israeli forces and Palestinians. IDF, police, and Shin Bet forces moved into the village of Surif near Hebron to arrest Mohammed Fakia, a 29-year-old Hamas terrorist who earlier this month shot dead Rabbi Michael Mark and injured his wife and 2 children as they were traveling in their car near the settlement of Otniel. As the security forces approached Fakia's home, they encountered resistance.
A battle began during the course of the raid. The terrorists opened fire in the direction of our soldiers. We returned fire.
In addition to gunfire, improvised grenades were thrown at the soldiers from the house. The Israelis responded by firing anti-tank rockets at the building. At one point, an elderly woman emerged, lightly injured by shrapnel. Later on, in the early morning hours, heavy machinery was brought in to demolish the terrorist's home. Fakia's body was eventually found in the rubble, surrounded by AK-47s and improvised grenades.
The home has 4 stories, 2 above the road and 2 beneath. The one above the road they demolished with missiles. They thought that the man was killed, but he kept resisting from 22:30 p.m. until dawn prayers.
Clashes broke out in the area during the operation between the security forces and local residents. Palestinian media said 6 Palestinians were injured. During the raid itself, which covered different locations, Fakia's brother and cousin were arrested. Both had helped hide the terrorist after he committed his attack. Another accomplice, 38-year-old Mohammed Amaira, was detained back on July 4th. He admitted to being Fakia's driver during the attack and is thought to have been one of the organizers. Amaira worked for the Palestinian Authority's security apparatus over the past few years, but the cell is believed to have operated on its own initiative without receiving orders from any organization.
And Shai Ben Ari now joins us in studio along with Amir Oren, government and military analyst for Haaretz newspaper. Gentlemen, good evening. Shai, first of all, there are more details of 2 members of the cell.
Right. Mohammed Fakia, first of all, the guy who actually shot dead Michael Mark back at the beginning of July, had spent 4 years in Israeli prison from 2006 to 2010. Actually, as a member, he went to prison because he was a member of Islamic Jihad. Amongst other things, he was involved in a weapons lab. While in prison, he was enlisted in Hamas. And Hamas had praised this operation, but they don't claim responsibility. Again, we're talking about something of an independent cell. The other person, a 38-year-old, the oldest member of this cell, Mohammed Amaira, was arrested earlier this month in the few days after the attack itself. He also spent more or less the same period in prison, 4 years, 2006 to 2010. He was involved in a similar attack back in the second Intifada. Again, something of an independent initiative without receiving any orders from high up above in any organization.
And Emil, what is the wider presence of terror cells within the West Bank?
You can't hold prisoners indefinitely. So even if they were sentenced to 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, some of them are die-hard members of either Islamic Jihad or Hamas, and pretty soon we are going to see Daesh members who are willing to kill and sometimes be killed in the line of what they see as their duty. And if they are released under several deals, or even if they are recruited into the Palestinian security forces as a way to give them employment and to get them out of the range and influence of the terrorist organizations, sometimes it is to no avail, because some people will always act against the Israeli authorities, including Israeli civilians.
And I'd like to go live to Hebron to Mohammed Al-Qasim, who is standing by. Mohammed, a tense night last night. What is the situation like right now?
Good evening, Mirav. The situation is quiet, but it's very tense. There has been sporadic clashes between the Israeli army and Palestinians throughout the southern part of the West Bank. We are just north of Hebron, the city of Hebron, and outside the village of Surif, where the operation took place last night. We've talked to Palestinians in Surif and also throughout this area who voiced they were very critical, not only of Israel, because that is somewhat expected, but also of the Palestinian Authority. In fact, relatives of Muhammad Faqih, who was killed early this morning by the Israeli army, they actually accused the Palestinian Authority of informing the Israeli army of the whereabouts of their son Faqih, saying that this is part of the ongoing security coordination between the Israeli and the Palestinians. Also, the Secretary of the Executive Committee for the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Dr. Shai Ben Ari, came out today criticizing and condemning the Israeli killing of Muhammad Faqih and saying that there is a systematic cleansing, ethnic cleansing committed by the Israeli army and the Israeli government, and he called on the international community to intervene.
Mohammed Al-Qasim with live updates from outside of Hebron. Thank you very much.